In today's gripping story, we step deep into the shadows of desire, secrets, and choices that could have changed everything. This is the confession of a woman who lived two lives, one as a loyal wife, and another as the woman no one ever truly knew. Her husband sensed something strange in her eyes that day, but he never knew the truth behind what she did, or who she did it with. Get comfortable, this is a mature, emotional journey full of tension, forbidden moments, and a truth she finally revealed to a stranger, and now, to us. I've always believed that some encounters are rehearsed by fate long before they happen. That day, that peculiar day, the universe seemed to pause, breathe, and purposely shift something in my path. I remember small things first, the way dust floated lazily in the morning light, how my coffee tasted sharper than usual, how the air carried a quiet electricity. Little signs, all pointing toward the arrival of a woman who would shatter every placid corner of my controlled life. I was sitting in the back of my studio, pretending to read emails I didn't care about, when I first saw her. She came in without hesitation, without checking the address twice, without the uncertainty most newcomers wore like a heavy coat. She stepped inside as though she already knew the place intimately, and perhaps, in some strange way, she did. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, slightly damp at the ends from the misty morning outside. A soft beige coat clung to her, unbuttoned as though she'd rushed. Her eyes, sharp, searching, landed on me. And then, something unmistakable happened. She smiled. Not politely, not distantly, but knowingly. "I was told you could help me," she said. Her voice didn't tremble. It carried warmth and intention, like someone speaking to a person she wasn't meeting for the first time, even if she was. I motioned her in, trying to hide the strange reaction rising in my chest. "Depends on the kind of help you're looking for." She glanced around. The studio was quiet, just the two of us. She seemed satisfied by that. "I need a place to talk, and to be myself for a moment," she murmured. Most people don't say things like that to strangers. But she wasn't most people. She moved as though she carried a secret the way others carried wallets or keys, something always on her, always carefully tucked away. I offered her a seat. She sat, crossing her legs with an elegance that wasn't deliberate but deeply ingrained, like second nature. When she pulled her coat closer around herself, I could see the faint outline of a wedding ring glinting on her finger. It was subtle but impossible to miss. "You're married," I said, not as a question but as an observation. She didn't flinch. "Very. But that's not what brought me here." She watched me with an expression I couldn't decode, half caution, half desire to confess something she had held too long. "I'm not here to be judged," she added quietly. "I just need a witness. Someone who doesn't know my husband, my neighborhood, my routines. Someone outside the circle." I wasn't sure what role she expected me to play. Therapist, stranger, confidant, but the way she looked at me, like I was the first open door she'd seen in months, made me lean forward slightly. "I can be that," I said. She exhaled, relief sliding across her features. And that's when she said it, the line that would echo in my head long after she left. "He saw me very peculiar that day," she whispered, "but he didn't know why. Only I know why, and I want someone else to know too." Her tone wasn't dramatic. It was honest, heavy with a truth she'd been carrying like a stone lodged deep in her chest. I didn't know then what she was about to tell me. I didn't know how tangled the threads of her life were, or how close she had come to destruction. I only knew that something inside her was unraveling, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, she wanted me to see the threads spill out. She looked at me. I nodded without quite understanding the promise I was making. "All right," I said. "Tell me everything." And she did. She began her story not with drama, not with confessions of guilt or betrayal, but with something strangely simple. It started on a Tuesday morning. Tuesdays, ordinary and forgettable, were the perfect camouflage for trouble, I suppose. She sat back in her chair as she spoke, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Something about her posture changed as she slipped into memory. She looked both younger and older all at once. "My husband woke up late," she said. "Not unusually late, but late enough that he rushed. And when he rushes, he never notices anything around him." "What did he miss?" I asked. She smiled faintly, as though remembering something both sad and thrilling. "Me." I raised an eyebrow, inviting her to explain. "I'd already been awake for hours," she continued. "Restless. I'd showered, changed twice, and stood in front of the mirror wondering if I should go through with it." "Go through with what?" She didn't answer immediately. She let the silence stretch, her eyes drifting to the window beside us as though the truth hovered somewhere in the air outside. I had a meeting, she finally said. Not a normal meeting, not a work meeting, a meeting I wasn't supposed to have. She paused, then added, and I wasn't dressed like a woman going to the grocery store or the gym. I looked different enough that if he'd paid attention, he would have asked where I was going. Her husband, she explained, was the type who saw routines, not details. The type who noticed if she forgot to make coffee, but not if she changed perfume or wore lipstick on a day she usually didn't. But that day, she said softly, he looked at me twice. I leaned forward. Twice, yes. The first time was in passing. The second time, well, that's when he saw something peculiar. What did he see? She swallowed, recalling the tension of the moment. He saw a glow in me. A tension in my shoulders. A tremble in my breath. Something alive, something guilty, something forbidden. He knew something was off, but he didn't know what. Her voice dropped lower. He asked me, is everything okay? And what did you say? I said yes, but it was a lie. I noticed her hands fidgeting, pressing against each other, fingers curling. She was reliving the adrenaline of that day, the rush of stepping outside herself. He kissed my cheek before leaving, she added. It was half-hearted, distracted. But that kiss, it felt like a question. And I had no answer to give. What were you planning? I asked. She looked at me with eyes that held both courage and shame. I was planning to meet someone, she said. Someone who wasn't my husband. I didn't react. She watched closely for judgment, but I kept my expression steady. She needed space to speak. It wasn't emotional, she said. It wasn't romantic. It was an escape. A moment designed entirely for me. Did he suspect anything? No, he thought I had errands. That's what I usually do on Tuesdays. No one tracks errands. She leaned forward, lowering her voice like a conspirator. But when he saw me looking different, so different, he hesitated. Like he almost recognized a woman he hadn't touched in months. Her eyes met mine. That's why I said he saw me peculiar that day. He saw the version of me that wasn't meant for him. A quiet intensity filled the room. And yet, she concluded, he still didn't stop me. He never knew where I went. He never knew what happened next. I exhaled slowly. And what did happen next? I asked. She smiled, slow, dangerous, unashamed. That, she said, is where the real story begins. What kind of man was he? I asked, though I wasn't entirely sure I wanted the answer. She shifted in her seat, her body subtly tightening, as though even recalling the man carried some charge with it. He was unexpected, she said. Not the type one ever imagined myself drawn to. He wasn't flashy, or charming in an obvious way. He didn't chase. He didn't flirt. He noticed. She let that word hang. Noticed what? I pressed. Everything, she replied. He's the kind of man who sees people, not performances. And I hadn't been seen, really seen, for a long time. Her eyes flicked toward me, as if checking whether I understood. I did, more than she knew. He worked near the cafe I visited sometimes, she continued. I used to sit by the window with a book I never actually read. He walked in one day and sat across from me. Not at my table, but in my line of vision. Her fingers played lightly along the rim of her cup. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't push anything. He just existed, calm, confident, a man who didn't need attention to feel significant. And that drew you in? I asked. Yes, she admitted without hesitation. I felt myself reacting in ways I hadn't reacted in years. My pulse changed. My thoughts wandered. I felt alive. She told me that over the following weeks, they exchanged glances more than words. Small acknowledgements. A nod. A half smile. A shared awareness. He was patient, she said. Too patient. He let me approach the edge of something without pushing me over it. And you chose to cross that edge, I said. Her lips curved. Eventually, the morning she left her house looking peculiar, she had finally messaged him. Just one line. I'm free for an hour. He responded almost instantly. I know a place. That was all, she said. And yet, everything. She described meeting him behind an old bookstore, an alley softened by age, overgrown with vines. A hidden entrance led to a small private studio he used for his work. A place where voices echoed softly and the world outside felt far away. When I walked in, he didn't touch me immediately, she said. He simply stood there, watching. Not with hunger, not with impatience, with recognition. I felt her words in a way I didn't expect. She was speaking not about romance or rebellion, but identity, waking up inside her own body after being numb for years. Did you regret it? I asked carefully. She met my eyes with surprising clarity. Not for a second. What I regretted was going so long without feeling like that. She described how the studio smelled faintly of cedar and ink, how the dim light stretched shadows across the room, how quiet the world became in that hidden place. He didn't ask questions about my marriage, she said. He didn't care why I came. He only cared that I wasn't there out of fear or obligation. Were you? No, she said. I was there because I chose to be. It was the first choice I made for myself in a very long time. Then she paused, her breath deepening. But what happened when I left? That's what changed everything. I leaned forward. What do you mean? She took a slow breath. When I stepped out of that studio, I wasn't the same woman who walked in. Something in me shifted, something visible. That's why my husband noticed the change later. He sensed something, but he didn't know what. She looked down at her hands. And the man I met, he wasn't finished with me. Her voice lowered. He wanted to see me again. And I agreed. The way she described it, the second meeting wasn't planned, it was inevitable. I told myself it was a one-time escape, she said. A moment I'd lock away. But the problem with moments like that is that they don't stay where you put them. And yet, I said, you kept going. Yes, she admitted, because for the first time in years, I felt wanted, not for what I provided, not for my role as a wife, not for my predictability. I felt wanted as a woman. Her voice softened. But the third time, that was when everything nearly unraveled. Her hands tightened around the edge of her chair as she began the final part of her confession. Even the air seemed to lean closer, as though curious to hear what she hadn't told anyone else. It was a Thursday, she said. Late afternoon. I thought my husband was working overtime. He wasn't, but she didn't know that. I texted him, the other man, and he replied instantly, come now. She hesitated telling me this part, perhaps because even she knew how close she'd edged to disaster. I didn't think twice, she said. I grabbed my keys, fixed my hair, and drove. I felt reckless, beautifully reckless. The city roads blurred behind her. She arrived at the studio in minutes. He opened the door before she even knocked. He looked different that day, she said. More intense, more certain, as though he knew this was the meeting that would define all the others. He pulled her inside. She didn't resist. But fate, as always, has a cruel sense of timing. Halfway through, she paused, exhaled. We heard footsteps. I felt my own stomach clench. He froze. I froze. It wasn't the footsteps of a stranger, it was heavier, familiar, purposeful. Her husband. He had come to surprise me, she whispered, her voice almost breaking at the memory. He wanted to take me out for dinner. A spontaneous gesture he rarely made. She heard his voice outside the door, his actual voice, calling her name. Everything inside me collapsed, she said. I felt my throat close. My knees nearly gave out. What did he do? I asked gently. The other man pressed his hand to my back and whispered, breathe. Stay still. She obeyed. Her husband stood outside the studio, confused, calling again. She could hear the concern, the irritation, the worry in his tone. He tried the handle, she said, pressing a hand to her chest. But it was locked. Locked. That lock saved everything. I thought he'd force it, she continued. I thought he'd knock. I thought he'd shout. Instead, he sighed, defeated, exhausted, and walked away. The moment the footsteps faded, she collapsed into the other man's arms. I cried, she admitted. Not from guilt, from fear, from the realization of how close I'd come to destroying both worlds. But he didn't comfort her like a lover. He held her like someone witnessing the edge of her limits. He told me something then, she said quietly. I won't be the reason your life falls apart. And what did you say? I told him I wasn't ready to stop, she confessed. That what we had felt real, more real than anything I'd felt in years. He looked at her with a mixture of desire and sorrow. And that's when he told me, if you walk out that door now, you go back to your life. But if you come back again, you're choosing mine. A choice, a real one. So which did you choose? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. She looked at me, eyes filled with something raw and unfiltered. I walked out, she said. But not because I chose my husband. I walked out because I needed time to choose myself first. She wiped a tear she hadn't noticed forming. He never exposed me. My husband never found out. My neighbor never asked again. The world kept spinning. And him? I asked. 2 days after their first encounter, she found herself thinking of him constantly, during chores, during conversations, even while sitting beside her husband on the couch. I wasn't comparing them, she clarified. It wasn't about choosing between men. It was about choosing between versions of myself. And the version you were with him felt. I prompted. Alive, she whispered. Bold, unafraid. She didn't admit this with pride, but with the honesty of someone confronting a truth too heavy to carry silently. He texted me again, she continued. I'd like to see you. Same place. Her pulse raced remembering it. I could see it in the way her fingers pressed against her knee. I told myself I wouldn't go. And yet, an hour later, I was already halfway there. When she arrived, he had already opened the studio door, as though sensing she was coming. He didn't smile, she said. He didn't act surprised. He looked at me the way someone looks at something they've been waiting for. He closed the door behind her gently, almost ceremonially. This time, she murmured, I didn't pretend to be confused about why I came. The studio felt different that day, warmer, closer, charged with something that made the air feel thick. He asked if I was sure, she said. His exact words were, I don't want to be an escape. I want to be a choice. And what did you say? I asked. I said his name, she replied softly. Just his name, and he understood. She wouldn't tell me the details of what happened inside that studio, she didn't need to. Her eyes conveyed enough. The kind of connection that transcends flesh, the kind that rewrites a person from the inside out. It was intense, she said. Not just physically, emotionally, mentally, like stepping into a version of myself that had been waiting in the dark. She described sitting on the floor beside him afterward, her back resting against the wall, her heartbeat slowly settling. He didn't ask about my husband, she said again. He didn't want to replace him. He wanted me, just me. But life, as it always does, complicated things. When I left the studio, she said, I saw someone. My breath hitched slightly. Who? A neighbor. Someone who knew me very well. She didn't see me coming out of the studio, but she saw me walking in that alley. And she asked later why I'd been there. What did you say? I lied. Easily. Too easily. Her expression darkened, not with fear, but with awareness of the line she was crossing. I began to realize how fragile everything was. One wrong step, one wrong glance, and the entire illusion would shatter. He's gone, she whispered. He moved months later, but what he awakened in me, that stayed. I sat silently, absorbing everything she had poured out. She stood slowly, adjusting her coat. I didn't tell you this to be forgiven, she said. I told you because I needed one person, just one, to know that I lived. Really lived, not as a wife. Not as someone's responsibility, as a woman who was wanted, and who chose to take a piece of life for herself. Before leaving, she turned back. And that's why I said he saw me peculiar that day. He saw a woman I kept hidden. But he never knew what she did. She walked to the door, paused, and added one last line. Now someone knows. And that's enough. Then she left, closing the door behind her. Leaving me with her story, one I could never forget. This story is a work of fiction created for mature audiences. It is intended for entertainment purposes only and does not promote infidelity or harmful behavior. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this gripping story. If this confession pulled you in, don't forget to like, comment, and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps this channel grow, and it means the world to me. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in her situation? Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep your heart open to the stories life hides behind closed doors.